I am the Good Shepherd. The Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the Good Shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I have received from my Father. The Jews who heard these words were again divided. Many of them said, "He is demon-possessed and raving mad. Why listen to him?" But others said, "These are not the sayings of a man possessed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind?"
I wonder who it is that you follow. Whose voice do you follow? Whether an actual voice, whether a virtual voice. Who has influence in your life? Who do you listen to? Whose actions offer you some kind of well-being or some kind of feel-good? To some extent or another, we are all followers in life. There are people that we follow, people we know, people that we admire, people that we think of as wise or as important. But I wonder how often we stop and think about why we follow those particular people. Why do we hit follow for some people? Why do we hit follow for some organisations? Why do we hit follow for some sports team or some band? And then not for others. There are lots of reasons why we follow someone or something. And today we're going to think not so much about why we follow Jesus, although that will come into it, but actually we're going to think about what sort of qualities he brings that makes him worth following. In other words, what kind of person is he that we follow? And today we come to kind of our second part of a look at John chapter 10, where two of the I am sayings of Jesus are found. Last week we thought about Jesus saying, "I am the gate, I am the threshold over which you cross into being saved or being safe." And we move on today and we're thinking about Jesus saying, "I am the good shepherd." It's probably one of the most famous sayings that Jesus ever said. The image of the shepherd and the sheep, it's a common one in the Bible. You can ask almost anyone, whether they're Christian or whether they're not, and they can probably give you quite a few of the lines of Psalm 23, for example, "The Lord is my shepherd." We all know this psalm. We know the idea of the shepherd taking care of his flock, leading his flock through all kinds of different things. And if Jesus is our shepherd, if Jesus is the one that we follow, what is the relationship that he has with his flock? Why do we follow him? And today I want us to think about just 4 things from this passage in John 10 that the shepherd does for the sheep. And we start with the very first words of the passage that we read. "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." Jesus tells his followers what he's going to do for them, what he's going to do for the whole world actually. "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." Over and over again in this passage, Jesus talks about laying down his life, choosing to lay down his life. This is important. This is worth Jesus repeating. Now, some might say, isn't Jesus just talking here about what a normal shepherd does in his job? It's the responsibility of the shepherd. The shepherd protects the sheep from attack by wild animals, for example. The shepherd protects the sheep from being stolen away by thieves. The shepherd maybe goes out after dark if one of the sheep has got lost. And in any of these ways, the shepherd risks his life for the sheep. But Jesus isn't talking here about risk. He isn't even talking here about an accident. He is talking about the active choice to lay down life for the sheep. And I think that takes Jesus' words beyond being a kind of simple metaphor about the care that the shepherd shows for the sheep. A shepherd knows that by the kind of job he does, he risks his life, he risks death. But Jesus is talking about intentionally dying. The shepherd lays down his life. He actively lays down his life for the sheep. And for centuries, all through the Old Testament, the idea of the shepherd is associated with God. God describes himself as the shepherd of his people, and he describes the flock as his people, his community. It's an image that would have been familiar to everyone who was listening to Jesus. From the wisest Pharisee to the poorest villager, everybody knew what Jesus was talking about. And as he said in several places in John's Gospel, Jesus is speaking about the importance of his death for the life of the flock, for the life of people. Now, Jesus doesn't speak here about the reasons that he faces death for the flock. He's clear that his life is given up for the well-being and for the life, if you like, of the flock. But he doesn't really say any more than that. What he says is, for your safety, for your protection, for your life, I will give up my life. And as he goes on, he makes it clear that his death is going to be no accident. It's a choice he makes, and it's a choice he makes in full control. So he says, I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and to take it up again. It's not actually been that long since we celebrated Easter. It might seem like a really long time ago, but it's only been a few weeks since we celebrated Easter. And as we look at the events surrounding Jesus' death on Good Friday, it's easy to think that things were tumbling out of control. Jesus' betrayal, Jesus' arrest, Jesus' trial, his horrible torture, it all seems beyond his choosing. But Jesus' death that we mark on Good Friday wasn't a defeat, it was power. The amazing thing about Easter is not just that Jesus died and rose again, incredible and amazing though that is. The amazing thing about Easter is that Jesus chose to die for us. This is the one we follow, the one who chooses to lay down his life for us. He is invested in our protection. He is invested in our care. He is invested in our future. And that brings us very neatly to the second thing that I think we can say about the shepherd. This shepherd is invested in the well-being of the flock. We've thought about the fact that the shepherd will lay down his life for the sheep, and there's a reason for this. It's because he has a real investment in what happens to the sheep. So Jesus goes on to say, the hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he's a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. There's a contrast here in the different people who might take care of the flock. Someone might be hired to look after the flock. He's paid to do a job. But when risk or when harm comes along, he says, no, I'm out. All the money in the world isn't enough for me to risk my life for this flock of sheep. It's just not worth the risk. And it's interesting, I think, because initially the hired hand appears to be someone to protect the sheep. He appears to offer protection for the sheep. But as soon as reality hits, as soon as the danger of wild animals, for example, comes along, he's found wanting. The shepherd, on the other hand, says Jesus, he owns the sheep, whereas the hireling is simply paid to look after them. There's no investment in the flock from the hired hand. The definition of a true shepherd, I guess, is that he's not in it for his own profit. He's not in it for his own safety. He's in it for the welfare, the benefit of the flock. And the real test of what he's in it for comes when danger approaches. Jesus says the hired hand's not the shepherd who owns the sheep. So when he sees a wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. The wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he's a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. What's this got to do with God's people? Well, I think it's easy to feel secure with something that doesn't offer us real protection. It can appear to be real security and real protection. But actually, when tough things happen, when hard things happen, it breaks down, it runs away, it disappears. It's easy to build our life out of things that appear secure. And then they crumble when things go wrong. But the shepherd will go out and meet the danger head on, even if it threatens his own life. To follow the Good Shepherd is to be sure, to be certain of his investment in the life of the flock. Later, Jesus is continuing to argue with the Pharisees beyond the passage that we read, and he comes back to the sheep image. He says, "My sheep listen to my voice. I know them and they follow me. I give them eternal life and they shall never perish." Do you hear the security in this? No one will snatch them out of my hand. There is so much security here. I give my life to the sheep and I will hold them tightly in my hand because they belong to me. And then that brings us to the third thing that we discover about the shepherd. This shepherd knows his sheep. In the verses we just read, and then also in the passage that we looked at last week, we see the way the voice of the shepherd is known to the sheep, and that each member of the flock is known to the shepherd, not just by sight, but by name. So last week in our passage, Jesus says he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. Every last one of us is unique. We all have our own quirks, we all have our own characteristics which make us who we are. And God looks at us and he sees our uniqueness, and we are so unique that we are known to God by name. I wonder if you've ever done that thing where you Google your name. Have you ever done that? I've done that. Where you Google your name just to see how many other people there are with your name. Let me tell you, there are like hundreds of Julie Greens in the world. It's an incredibly common name. It's very scary to know how many of us there are out there. There is just one Julie Green though, who looks like me, who talks like me, who thinks like me, who hates bananas and who loves reading. And God knows all of that, and more actually, about me. You are known to God by name. In all your uniqueness, you are known to God. That is how precious you are and I am to God. And in a way, I think it's in hearing God's voice speaking to us, and that as we follow him, we realise just how precious we are to God. And that's why I think Jesus repeats this. He talks about him knowing the sheep recognising his voice. And then in today's passage, he kind of re-emphasises it. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me and I know my Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. There's that laying down my life thing again. To be known by him, to know him, is like the knowing between Jesus, God the Son, and God the Father. Now that is a huge statement. We are known by Jesus in the same way as he is known by the Father. Is that what he's saying? It's all about closeness. There is no closer, no deeper relationship than the one we have with God. God knows us so much, incredibly. He knows us better than we know ourselves sometimes. But before we get carried away, Jesus is not saying that we know him in the same way as he knows the Father. The relationship between God the Son and God the Father is perfect. What Jesus is saying though is, in the same way as there's a mutual knowing between God the Father and God the Son, there's a mutual knowing between us and God. We are known to him and we know him. Our relationship with the Good Shepherd is one of closeness and love that comes from him to us, and closeness and love that comes from us to him. He knows us and loves us, and we in turn know him and love him. Jesus' death is approaching, even in this passage, but later on in John's Gospel, as Jesus is praying just before he dies, he says, "This is eternal life, that they know you," that's us, his followers, "that they know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent." This is life. This is a theme in John's Gospel. Life comes only in knowing God through Jesus. Now that's really easy to say, but it's much harder to do. The relationship of knowing him and loving him takes work from us. It doesn't just happen naturally. We need to act to know him. We need to read our Bibles. We need to pray. We need to learn from others. We need to worship. All of these things together help us to know him better. And we're in good company in this desire to know God. The Apostle Paul, when he's writing to the church at Philippi, he says, "I want to know Christ." Such a simple, clear phrase. I want to know Christ. Yes, to know the power of his resurrection and participation in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death, and so somehow attaining to the resurrection from the dead. Paul goes on though that he hasn't achieved this fully. So he is going to keep going. He is going to keep persevering. He's going to keep desiring to know God more. And I wonder as we read about the Good Shepherd knowing us and loving us, do we have that same desire to know him and to love him and to put the work in to knowing him and loving him? He is God. There is no one worth knowing more. The last thing I think that the shepherd does for us is that he unites the sheep into one flock. In fact, he doesn't just unite the flock, he enlarges the flock, he makes it bigger. So remember here in John 10, Jesus is speaking to the Pharisees, to the leaders of God's people. And in just the chapter before, these same Pharisees have had a man thrown out of the synagogue because Jesus healed the man and then the man kind of defended the healing. And then in the first part of John 10, Jesus has more or less called the Pharisees thieves and robbers. He's called himself the gate, the threshold across which people come, which anyone can come, in order to be saved. There's room in God's people, says Jesus, for all sorts of people who are ready to come to him and to enter through Jesus, the gate. That's the image from last week, of course. We follow Jesus the shepherd, and so Jesus says, I have other sheep that are not of this sheepfold. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. Jesus, the good shepherd, is drawing more and more people into his flock, and we're part of that. We are part of that drawing into the people of God. It was always God's purpose that his people would grow beyond those in Judaism, that his people would expand and draw in people from all over the place, every background. Jesus calls us all into his sheepfold. Do we listen to his voice? Do we follow him? He does more than call us together and kind of bunch us up. He actually creates unity. There is one flock and one shepherd. Now, unity isn't the same as uniformity. It's not about making a kind of flock of clones. It's about uniting us in one purpose, which is following Christ and sharing that good news of Christ with others in the world. It's about uniting us in his love for one another, no matter who we are, no matter where we're from. It's about uniting us in fellowship as we worship the Good Shepherd. There is one God, one shepherd. There is one flock, but there are a lot of different sheep. And that's us. And we celebrate our diversity, as we should celebrate our diversity. But we work hard for our unity. In the Old Testament, God speaks through the prophet Ezekiel to the leaders of his people, leaders which God calls shepherds. And these shepherds have been literally anything but good shepherds. They've caused pain, they've caused destruction for God's people. And when it comes to chapter 34 of Ezekiel, we have this really beautiful picture of God coming and shepherding the flock for himself, bringing unity, even when the leadership has caused disunity. And so Ezekiel 34 says, this is what the sovereign Lord says, I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. As a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he's with them, so will I look after my sheep. I will rescue them from all the places where they were scattered on a day of clouds and darkness. I will bring them out from the nations and gather them from the countries, and I will bring them into their own land. I will pasture them on the mountains of Israel, in the ravines and in all the settlements of the land. Now, this is a picture of God bringing his people back from exile. But it's also a wonderful picture of just God drawing people to himself. It's God who unites us. It's God who brings us together in a place of safety and unity under his leading. These are just 4 ways that the Good Shepherd cares for his flock. I think as his people, let's learn to recognise his care, recognise his commitment to us, recognise that he has given his life in order that we might have life. This is the Good Shepherd. I am the Good Shepherd, says Jesus. Not just any old shepherd, but the Good Shepherd. I wonder what stands out to you when you think about this idea of Jesus being your shepherd and being the Good Shepherd. We've thought a lot about some really wonderful qualities that we can see in Jesus describing himself as the Good Shepherd. He loves. He's committed and invested in his people in the flock. He knows the flock. He unites us all together. These are fantastic qualities, and it's good for us to reflect on. But actually, the word Jesus uses of himself is good. I am the good shepherd. Not just any shepherd, but the good shepherd. Why good? Good nowadays is a sort of a kind of throwaway word that we use all the time. So when someone asks us how we are, and we're kind of neutral, we're not bad, we're not brilliant, we kind of go, yeah, I'm good, yeah. It doesn't really mean very much. Or good can be a sort of average description of something. When we don't want to say something bad, we sort of go, yeah, it was good, it was okay, it was good. It's quite bland, it's quite nothing. Or good can even be quite a negative word. It's a word we sort of associate with being kind of goody. Oh, he's such a good person. We use it quite sarcastically, or some of us use it quite sarcastically, quite negatively. And although good is a perfectly fine translation for this word, our English word doesn't quite cover the scope of the word that Jesus uses in Greek. It's not just about being good. It's also about beauty and excellence and nobility and attractiveness, all kind of bundled together into one word, one description. Now, beauty and attractiveness is not really about what Jesus looks like, of course. When Jesus is saying he's the good shepherd, he's not saying something weird about being better looking than the rest of the leaders of God's people. He's talking about the beauty of what he's doing, who he is, the beauty of who he is in his character and in his actions, the attractiveness of his call for us to follow him. And that's why there's such clear contrast with the hired hands who don't really care for the sheep. The good shepherd is noble and committed. He is the shepherd who always acts for the sheep, right up to giving his life for them. When the good shepherd calls, people follow. Why? Well, because of all the things that we've just thought about. There is excellence in the kind of leader that he is, the kind of leader that we want to follow. Tom Wright, in his commentary on these verses, says, the point of calling Jesus the Good Shepherd is to emphasise the strange, compelling power of his love. And I love that really simple description. The strange, compelling power of his love. There is something which draws us to follow. And to many people, that just seems odd. It seems strange. And even when they ask us about it, we can't necessarily give an answer. We can give a list of beliefs, maybe, but actually the answer that we want to give is about how we feel, drawn towards him and drawn into his flock, how it feels to be part of his community, to know his love and his care and his leading. And that sounds really strange to those who don't know him. But they can see how much it draws us. Strange and compelling power of his love. We thought before about the prophecy of Ezekiel. And through Ezekiel, God challenges the people who have responsibility to lead God's people, to shepherd his people. And then God himself steps in and he makes a promise about life for his people. He says, I will tend them in good pasture, and the mountain heights of Israel will be their grazing land. There they will lie down in good grazing land, and there they will feed in rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. I myself will tend my sheep and have them lie down, declares the sovereign Lord. I will search for the lost and bring back the strays. I will bind up the injured and strengthen the weak. But the sleek and the strong I will destroy. I will shepherd the flock with justice. This is goodness. This is what the Good Shepherd promises for his people. Good grazing. Enough to nourish our lives in all sorts of ways, to build us up spiritually and emotionally. A place to lie down. Peace for life in the care of this Good Shepherd. Those that are lost are brought back to him, not left to their wanderings. He promises justice for all. This is the goodness of our shepherd. My question for all of us, though, is whether people can see that we follow this Good Shepherd, or better still, can they see why we follow this Good Shepherd? Can they see that we're part of a flock led by the one who calls himself the Good Shepherd? Who we follow is quite a public thing these days. People can see the kind of groups, the kind of individuals, bands, sports teams, whatever, that we interact with. And who we follow leads our thinking and guides us in all sorts of things that we do. I wonder if people can see you following Jesus, the Good Shepherd. Now, I don't mean typing amen if you love Jesus in the comment section on Facebook or Instagram. Do you know what? You can type as many amens as you like, and if you want to do that, fine. But you can type as many amens as you like. And if your life doesn't reflect that you are following the Good Shepherd, then it means nothing. When we follow, people see our following. And they see it not with our amens. They see it with our life. Does your life reflect the leadership of the one who was prepared to give up his life for you? If God shepherds the flock with justice, like he said in Ezekiel, is that justice seen in the way you live your life or I live my life? If God brings you to safe pasture, are you prepared to feed yourself from that pasture? Remember, the shepherd brings the sheep to pasture, but he doesn't force the sheep to eat. It's the sheep themselves who do the eating. Do you take action to build up your life from the resources which God leads you to? If Jesus lays down his life for the sheep, are you prepared to give your whole life to following him, not just parts of it, and to let everyone see that that's what you're doing? Our following the Good Shepherd should be clear and visible in our lives. But we also have to remember that opinions about Jesus divided people. And if people can see that we're following him, we have to be prepared for divided opinions. Jesus had healed a blind man on the Sabbath, something that was forbidden by Jewish law. That man had defended what Jesus had done and was thrown out of the synagogue. But when the man met Jesus again, he believed in him and he worshipped him. That's all in John chapter 9. And that led Jesus to the teaching that we looked at last week and today about the gate, the sheep and the shepherd. And by the end of our passage, there actually are still the same divisions that there were at the beginning. So John tells us the Jews who heard these words were again divided. Many of them said, "He is demon-possessed and raving mad. Why listen to him?" But others said, "These are not the sayings of a man possessed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind?" Jesus says, "Come and follow me. I am the Good Shepherd. Be part of my flock." He has warned people about following those folk who don't really care about them, who aren't really invested in them. He's spoken about his love for the sheep. And some people say, this guy's mad. They call him demon-possessed, someone not speaking for God but speaking against God. And nowadays people say the same sort of thing. Jesus was crazy, they say. Why follow him? Or Jesus was delusional. Why follow him? Or maybe even Jesus didn't exist and God is just the big sky fairy for simple-minded people. You see that a lot online. If we choose to follow, and it is a choice, If we choose to follow, we need to be prepared for the challenge that comes both to the shepherd but also to his flock. But if we believe that what Jesus says is true, if we trust that he is the good shepherd, and like some of the people listening to him back then, if we realise that his words and his actions are believable, then don't we want to make that clear to those around us? Don't we want them to also know the Good Shepherd? We follow any number of people. Social media offers us a whole world of following. And we share the things that we like from those people that we follow. We share music, we share words, we share sports results even. We want to know others to know why these things are important to us. In amongst all that following, are we prepared to share things about the Good Shepherd? What he said, what he's done, how we've encountered him this week, why we follow him? Do your friends know that you are part of this flock? If Jesus really is such a good shepherd, we should want more and more people to be drawn into the flock alongside us. Be prepared for division to come? Yes. Be prepared for questions to be raised? Yes. That's the reality of following Jesus. But also it is the joy of being part of his flock.